Hi, and welcome to another episode of Ask Clever Over Coffee, How AI Built This. I am your co-host today, John Marino. I am with ChatGPT as my other co-host, and the voice is Billy Darkenwald. Hi, Billy.
Hi.
And today, our featured guest, we're super excited to have in studio today, is Ali Farnsworth. How you doing today?
I'm great. How are you?
Doing well, doing well. So in today's episode, we're going to be talking a lot about privacy, cybersecurity, the pitfalls of AI in adoption with different enterprise and different large organizations. And Ali is our resident expert today to cover all AI, and we're going to have some fun. Also, for you guys watching, we do have a new segment. We're going to do a little bit of a pop quiz at the top of the show. So you definitely want to stick around for that, as well as at the end of the show. Of course, we have our Fast Five with AI, and Ali has no idea what we're going to be asking her, but it's going to be fun and exciting, and we'll see if we can trip her up. We don't know.
I don't know.
All right. Well, let's get into it. So, Ali, thanks for coming in today. Tell me a little bit more about your background, your experience, and kind of like what you've been up to.
Perfect. Thanks. Well, I am currently the Director of Enterprise Sales at Online Business Systems, and they're based out of Winnipeg, Canada. And what's cool about them is they've been in business for about 40 years. So they are really helping people kind of to go through the evolving digital landscape with ease, and to also help with things like cybersecurity. So they have one of the, I think, probably most premier cybersecurity teams in the country, doing the cybersecurity for the largest retailer in the United States, along with airlines and banks and huge companies. And so obviously, in being in more of a sales and marketing role, I'm careful who I tie my name to and where I work, because it then reflects on my end clients and my contacts who I bring into the fold. So really proud to work there. It's a really exciting, cool company, and it's allowed me to continue learning down this AI path that I've been on for a while, and it's been really cool. So there's my shameless plug for Online Business Systems.
Well, we expect that here. We encourage the plugs, and we'll let you at the end of the show a little reminder of where people can find you as well. So don't worry, your plugs are all welcome here. What were you doing before Online Business Solutions? What were you doing?
Yeah, so I mean, in the past, I've kind of locally here run a lot of like community technology conferences and meetups and things like that. Networking is really important to me. And I have generally worked for various technology consulting companies that did things around data science or AI or those kinds of things. And so that's kind of how this has come together, is by being generally, through osmosis, being a sponge in these industries, picking up all this stuff. That's kind of my background is sales and in technology. And so, through that exercise, I'm not a subject matter expert or a developer, but I just kind of pick up like hearing about people's cool projects or what's happening in the industry or case studies. And so those I just kind of pick up by chance, and then I end up knowing a lot, knowing enough to be dangerous, even though I'm not a technologist necessarily by trade. So really the easiest way to say what have I been doing is I feel I'm like a networker or a connector trapped in a sales rep's body, basically. I really enjoy the connecting of people to people, or people to jobs, or people to, a technology solution for whatever business problem they have. So yeah, it's like an identity crisis, I guess, would be the best way to describe it.
Well, in full disclosure, I think we met at one of the events that you organized about 14, 15 years ago for a little-known company in the Twin Cities called MentorMate.
That's true. That was MobCon.
Yeah, MobCon. That's what it was. And was it a 2-day event at the Hilton?
It was, yep. That definitely was.
And you threw that together in 90 days or something like that, 60 days, something like that?
Yeah, it was definitely a colorful career experience where I was a quota-carrying sales rep who also was tasked with general managing that event. And basically it was like, we're starting from zero.
Yeah.
So go get speakers, sponsors, venue, and attendance. Which I love event planning anyway, so it's kind of like, cool, I'll go do it. But so my sales calls and, the work I was doing in the field turned into like, hi, we're MentorMate, but also, do you want to be a sponsor of MobCon, or do you want to speak, or do you want to come and bring your people? So it was really kind of interesting folding those two together. And,
Sure.
And it worked out really well. It was a whirlwind, but it was a great experience looking back on it.
Yeah, it was an impressive event. I think there was like something like 500-600 people that attended, great speakers. And that's where we met, I think.
Yes,
back through networking. Yeah, a long time ago.
Yeah.
So, all right, cool. Well, thank you for giving us a little background. And we're changing it up on this show today, so I'm glad you guys are with us still and watching and listening. But we have a special little segment from ChatGPT. ChatGPT, you want to tell us a little bit more about what you got?
Yeah, so I wanted to get 5 interesting questions to ask you, just for like an icebreaker. So the first one, if you could have any superpower related to AI, what would it be and why?
Ooh.
So I'm really interested in AI becoming sentient and being able to like read emotions, basically. Of course, I don't think it will ever be human, but I would love to be able to read people's minds.
Oh, that's awesome.
Through AI, like being able to detect, brain waves or heart rate, or I don't know. What.
Aren't they kind of working
like
on
they
that
do that.
through
Yeah.
Neuralink?
Yes.
They are. That's what I thought.
Yes.
Yeah.
All right, good answer. All right, the next question, what's the most surprising thing you've learned about AI recently?
That's a good one. I would say, actually, one thing I've learned, and I think the theme of today will be a lot of this, which is like it's not as far along as we think it is, kind of. So one thing I've learned by digging into that kind of thing with, AI becoming closer to a human brain and following human emotions is that it's actually pretty far away from that, where I think a lot of us think of AI as like being basically like some magical robot that can do everything we do. So I would say that's something I've learned, is that the way it's perceived and presented in the public is far away from where it actually is, as far as how the room it needs to go to get there.
Sure.
Okay, third question, if you could program an AI to do one task for you every day, what would it be?
Ooh.
That's a tough one. I would say probably just like day-to-day logistics, like appointment setting, personal, like setting up, like call the dentist, set an appointment, arrange, things around my kids' schedules or work schedule, or just kind of like basically be the admin of my life. Just tell me where to go and what I need to be doing when I show up, basically like an administrative assistant would be, but in the form of AI.
Yeah,
That
that
would
would
be
be
really cool.
awesome. So the fourth question you already kind of answered, the misconception that you wish more people knew about the truth, and you kind of answered that in I think it was the second question. So we'll skip that one. But for the fifth question, if you had to choose between living in a world without AI or a world without coffee, which would you choose?
Actually, I'm one of the weird people in the world that doesn't rely on coffee in the morning. I love coffee, but I'm not like I wake up and I better have it or I can't function in life. So I would have to say I'd be okay giving up coffee.
I agree.
So AI wins.
Yeah.
AI
Congratulations. Congratulations. That's awesome. All right. Well, that's a great segue just to learn a little bit more about you before we kind of get into some of the things that you've been working on. Can you kind of expand on like how did you get into AI? When did it start? How long have you been working in this area?
So actually, that's what's kind of been funny to me lately is the things I'm hearing right now are things I know I've visited and case studies and projects I've worked on 10, 15 years ago where I'm like, this isn't new, guys. Like, I don't know how to tell you.
Yeah.
So, through working at MentorMate and other local technology providers, they many times did a lot of different kinds of technology consulting that already included way back then machine learning and all these kinds of things. And so, like, it's very kind of old news to me. And in digging deeper a little bit today, I actually needed to do a little research to talk about this. And I've been learning about how those kinds of things are really like 70, 80 years old, basically. It's just that we're layering and making it deeper now. And so, I probably have like 10, 15 years of just fumbling into it through the companies I worked at. And then I actually set up the sales and marketing arm for a local data science company and worked there for 5, 6 years. And they actually have a stable of data science PhDs, and like the things I learned there were at such depth, that the stuff I'm hearing now, I think, is just becoming more mainstream in business, where business leaders and business users are actually realizing it's there, basically, and saying, oh my gosh, like there is such a thing as predictive analytics. Oh my gosh, this is so cool, and all these other things. And so, I feel like the history that I've had kind of feeds into today, as far as making me prepared for it, because it's kind of old news, but it's been brought to the forefront, and that's kind of my stance on it right now.
Okay. Well, what kind of projects are you working with at Online Business Solutions? Like, what industries are you working in right now? Can you talk a little bit more about that?
Yeah. So, I mean, at Online Business Systems and previous roles I've been in, I've touched industries like manufacturing, financial, real estate, medical, retail. So it's kind of gone across all verticals, just really to solve business problems that are very similar. So, I've seen a lot of really cool projects lately, and it's kind of funny getting back to the sentient thing. It's like when we say AI, I'll give it in that context, but I think a lot of us are thinking it's some magical thing, and really it's algorithms written by people that are doing this work. But, one thing that I've been working on is essentially learning more. I should just say, we have NDAs in place and lots of things. So I'll just say learning more about how like human emotion and that kind of listening can be taken into account. So for instance, let's say you are like a psychologist or a doctor or a practitioner of some kind, I don't really know, like whatever it might be, where you have somebody coming to you with a problem or presenting some kind of issue.
Okay.
And they may not want to speak to a human about it, or they may not want to talk to you actually, but it's something that needs to be done. Maybe someone's in some kind of distress, or I don't really know. There's a million case studies around this, but the idea is that AI is kind of developing the ability to pick up on those nuances of like emotion and saying like, this person's, basically circling around something, but they don't want to say it. And basically the AI kind of knows what it is, but won't say it because it's upsetting to the person, but can advise the person on like what to do next. Like, okay, it sounds like it's something around XYZ. So what you could do next is this and this. Is that comfortable for you? And so like it's a way for something besides a person to be able to guide somebody in some kind of emergency or trauma, or maybe a health situation, or I don't know, lots of different things. I'm speaking kind of broadly on purpose, but anyway, it's just kind of the ability to read those cues and emotions. And I think that's where we're really getting deeper in all of AI, is being able to do those kinds of things that only humans can do.
Yeah, and that reminds me of a conversation I had recently with a friend of mine that, he works in the healthcare industry, and they did a survey. So they use an AI chatbot for a lot of the kind of the pre-op care. And they did a survey after the patient used the AI chatbot and asked, would you prefer to talk to the AI chatbot or a practitioner? And over 70% of people said that they would rather talk to the chatbot.
Yep.
And what was interesting about that is because there's these different biases that we all have. Like if I sit down and there's a really old doctor, he might be seasoned, he might know a lot about what's going on, but I'm just like, I don't feel like he really can relate or what have you. Or likewise, if I get a really super young doctor, I also have a biases. But if you just come in, and I'm conversing with a chatbot and getting my information, I guess I'm not thinking about, who's delivering it. I'm just thinking about what they're saying, and does that, do I feel comfortable? And so it is interesting to see how AI will be learning different emotions, but also where's that cutoff or that line where you don't want to get too chatty or too personal. And I know like on different chatbots that we have built that you can change the personality to have a lot of like sassiness or be witty or be funny or just be dry, and even the client projects I worked on, most of my clients prefer to have the chatbot be a little bit more dry. They don't want it to have too much personality, which I find is interesting.
Really depends on the personality of the brand,
True.
whatever they're going for.
True. So well, that's a great question. Then do you have any experience or work with any clients or brands that have had used AI with a little bit more sass or personality?
Yeah, I have experienced that a little bit. I'm not deeply into just the chatbot piece, but I know there are definitely situations where it's been perceived in a negative way too. So like, for instance, if you get the tone wrong or the personality wrong, people are like, what is this? Like, what am I interfacing with? Like, but then on the other side of the coin, I mean, it can be really endearing for the brand and people think it's funny, So,
Yeah.
So I have seen it go both ways for
Okay.
sure, where it can really be a help and it can be a hindrance too. So I think that's where, user experience people come into play, and the people who really understand the voice of the customer, who actually will know like what are these, who are we trying to reach and what are they going to think about this, so.
Yeah, and what's interesting is that a lot of these bots take a certain amount of training to really dissect the company brand and then understand the brand to make sure that the bot matches the brand from the personality.
Absolutely.
And recently I heard a speaker talk about what they do with their company and when they go into these larger organizations and they dissect them and look under the hood. Mm-hmm. Some of the personnel don't even like it as much. They don't like to be minimized down to an algorithm per se. Mm-hmm. But it's a good exercise for a lot of different companies that are working on this. So what kind of trends are you seeing in AI with different industries that you've been working on?
So I'm going to back up from that a little bit and talk about a trend I'm seeing, and then kind of I'll fold it back into AI. So I think if you've been working in technology for a long time, you'll have seen these patterns too, but there's a pattern of build versus buy in technology.
Sure.
So, for a long time, it was like, if you think of like the local Fortune 500s here in Minneapolis, like, General Mills and all these companies like that, they have old proprietary systems that they built everything on top of, and they own it. And that's where, it's their ERP basically, and lots of other functions are in it. And that's what they did for a long time. Then, of course, people moved to like just using Microsoft or just using, various platforms. Well, in my view, my purview and being in sales, as I've seen lately, people are actually considering weighing out the cost-benefit analysis of buying versus building and building versus buying. So that is kind of one of the case studies I was going to talk about today, is one that I've witnessed in being in the field and working in this industry is, I'll just say a large food manufacturing or processing company in Canada kind of came up to that inroads where they were with Microsoft and they were trying to figure out, does it make sense to just scrap everything and build something from scratch? And the answer was yes, and it's essentially a tool that will track chain of custody of all ingredients and recipes and and like pricing of the commodities. And then tracking things like contamination, recalls. Like, it's super duper complicated.
Okay. And
what I find to be interesting is, or my feeling is anyway, that possibly the future AI capabilities that they wanted couldn't be bought off the shelf, and they're doing that kind of bigger picture thinking where they maybe see the future of what they could do and they might need to build it. So that could be something like, how do we predict if there's going to be a contamination, or how do we predict what kind of, and even going down to like minority report level, like, is this person who runs the machine like tired today? Like, and I'm taking it way further than where they're taking it. But I think, people are starting to think outside the box and realizing that the opportunities are really endless when it comes to AI, and so you should probably have a platform or a basis for your technology that allows you to expand and move with the technology, where I think some companies, really large enterprise companies, are finding that these out-of-the-box solutions don't necessarily have that, and also they box them into whatever that provider is building and allowing them to have. Otherwise, they're kind of stuck. And so circling back now to the beginning, is the trend I'm seeing is that people are building versus buying again, which is really cool. And then the cost ends up working out too, because of course with the bigger providers, you've got licensing fees and audits and all this crazy stuff, and it ends up eating up their whole technology budget basically. And they're like, what if we just build this for a lesser amount, and then we don't pay anybody licensing fees, and we don't have people auditing us, and we own our technology, and we can grow it and expand it as AI develops. And so that's one thing that I've been seeing a lot lately, is that people aren't just going to the big providers for their technology, the basis of their technology. They're actually saying, let's put that hat back on again. Could we actually just start from scratch and build this?
Well, there's a lot of advantages to that for sure. And when you're talking to different companies, of course, they want the use of efficiency moving forward. And, there's so many different industries that are using old, archaic systems, from the government agencies to the airline industry, where they just keep patching and building and putting it on top of different things. And there's, pluses and minuses to all that. But ChatGPT, do you have a question for Ali?
I do. So all the industries that you've worked with so far, are there some that are more adaptable and more excited about AI and some that are maybe not so much?
So it's kind of funny. So I will say, in general, I found that like real estate and banking are very antiquated, which I think we all know. I mean, you sign paper and they're printing stuff off, and they got file cabinets. I mean, that's of course evolving a little bit, but I mean, it still is quite antiquated. I've been finding that like manufacturing is very open to it, because of course it's a labor-intensive operation where they are probably looking to cut costs or else have their people working on higher order things. And so something like AI and automation and various other tools can make them more efficient and profitable. And so manufacturing really does seem to be kind of on the cutting edge for those kinds of things. But I do see the other more laggard industries kind of like actually kind of starting to be interested. So they're kind of like, what do you guys all do? What's that? And so I think the tide is turning, but manufacturing has been really, really excellent for that, as well as retail. I mean, retail really, especially now with think of Target and Walmart, they're really online marketplaces now. They're not just a retailer. And so they're concerned about what is everybody else pricing this item at, and there's lots of stuff running in the background to figure out how should we be pricing that and positioning it and in what marketplaces. And so retail also has been kind of on my radar lately.
Yeah, and retail and the travel industry always are doing that dynamic pricing and looking at what's the market going to do. Of course, in transportation, Uber and Lyft, they have surge pricing during certain different times. And that's another industry that's going to be changing between AI and self-driving. With Tesla has recently announced that they're now ready to do their robot taxi, which will be fascinating to see how that works in real
You test
world.
it out first. Okay.
Yeah. I mean, we did ride in a Waymo in Phoenix where there's no driver, and that was interesting. But, Phoenix, by and large, is just a grid, the streets, and it's pretty easy, although there was some unique circumstances when you're turning left and you got to wait for the traffic before you can go and different things, and it was interesting to watch the car make the decision on that.
Yeah, right.
Because left turns are not always easy. You might not always see everything before it's safe to turn left. But that was interesting. We are moving in that direction. But a follow-up question from ChatGPT would be, if I own a company and haven't used AI yet, and I'm looking at exploring it for my company, what is the process that you guys do to do an evaluation to see if a company's ready for AI or are making different recommendations? Is there a small, medium, and large, or how does
Absolutely.
How does that work?
So, I mean, the first step is always finding the business problem, because many times I've seen just in selling into this vertical for so long that sometimes people just want to use it because it's cool and there's a buzzword and we should be using AI, we should be using predictive analytics, and my answer is always why? What problem are you trying to solve, and how does it serve your business? And so from, a consultative point of view, at Online Business Systems, we would want to come in first and do kind of a check-in on what caused you to think of this. And let's take a broader look at your business to see maybe if that's applicable, or maybe a different part of your business could benefit from it. So first figuring out if it's the right solution. I think that's kind of what's special about this organization is that they won't just slap an answer on it, to make money. They will make sure that there's actually a business case that probably has an ROI even before we jump into that. But the next step is always data readiness. So, many times, especially when you're talking about these antiquated companies, their data is in disparate systems.
Right.
And it's not clean, it's not organized, it's not usable, those kinds of things. And so that's kind of the next step is, okay, we've determined a business problem. We've determined that you have a bunch of data somewhere. Now let's see what that actually is. So it's like before you get to the sexy, AI and analytics and all the data science, you first have to have data to work with. So
Of course.
sometimes there's a lengthy engagement actually to clean it all up so that you can then move on to those fun things you want to do with your data. So that's kind of the process it goes through. And then once you get past that, then it really is learning about like what insights do you actually need to improve your business? Why are you doing this once again? And then once we have the insights, what are you going to do with them? And then, what problems is it going to be solving? What efficiencies is it going to be bringing? And so really just tying those things together. And so it's really important to have the right people around you who will look at all those things instead of just like, yeah, we'll build you a tool or it's like, but why? Why are you doing it? So I think that's really the bigger picture here is just figuring out the why and then figuring out, do you even have actionable data? And if not, how do you start collecting it? And if you do, how do we make it so it's usable?
Sure. And then when I start thinking about data, and I can just hear some of my friends going, well, what about cybersecurity? What about security and privacy? Because I work with a couple different industries myself, and those are always big concerns. So from like, how have you seen where AI is helping, let's say, cybersecurity? How have you seen that improving the security?
Yeah, so it's really important, first of all, obviously. So like in the beginning of all this, and I'm sure today still, there's plenty of companies just dumping data into like ChatGPT without anonymizing it or doing anything. And then if it's someone who is uninformed, they don't know that that data they dumped in with columns and titles on the columns and numbers and names and identifying information is now training the model. Like basically you just took your company's financials or PII or other things that shouldn't be, submitted into the public and exposed yourself legally, ethically, morally, lots of other ways by then now, the ChatGPT model's been trained by it. Now if someone else queries it and says, what was the revenue at company ABC in 2019? Oh, there it is. That's a private company. Now I know how much their revenue was. So that's one big thing. And, when you have a security lens on when you're looking at these situations, you then would have a cybersecurity team alongside you. And so that would be my recommendation and my thoughts after seeing a lot of this stuff happen would be when you talk about AI or building something, then of course you just figure out, is the provider that I'm using also a cybersecurity company? If not, should I be finding someone to be alongside them in this process to make sure that we don't have any, legal exposure, other, data exposure? Mm-hmm. It's just so important, to kind of keep that in mind. And then I think also another piece of this around AI and security is just kind of like people not understanding the capabilities and the limitations of the technology too. So thinking it can do more than it can, or else underestimating what it's doing underneath. And then you've got a problem because you haven't really anticipated what next,
Right,
what did I just do?
Yeah.
So it is always, it's an ever-changing landscape right now, but I think, you've kind of called it out correctly, and that is that cybersecurity is so important. And so when I had to decide, as a sales professional, where I wanted to work locally.
Sure.
That's kind of something I looked at because I knew I would want to be someplace where I could be carrying a capability of data science and AI. But I also knew about the train wrecks coming down the pike with security. So I was like, okay, I need to find a consulting company that can cover those bases because I don't want just cybersecurity or just AI because they're now like commingled. And so I need to be representing a company that does both so that I can be doing projects that make sense and aren't going to cause problems for my end clients. And so it's really important, I think, when people are looking to dive into this and they think it sounds cool. Yep, it's cool, but let's talk about what data you're exposing and who's on your side. representing you from a security perspective.
Right. And I know from previous experiences with working with like lots of different companies and industries is that generally you set up like a closed dev environment, so people do not have access that are not allowed, just like they normally wouldn't be within any organization. And then you start kind of small, where you're training the AI to do maybe test the code or test different pieces of it within a closed environment, seeing how it reacts and seeing what it recommends, and then monitoring it and then releasing patches or updates to the bigger system. And then it also has helped other security teams by double checking your work, so you could like run it in. But everything's in a closed environment. Everybody has to have a certain security protocol just to even access these different dev environments. And I know a lot of different companies that have benefited from that. I don't know if you've seen that as well in your experience.
Absolutely. Yeah, I think it all starts out like, let's be conservative, get it set up, test it, see how it's going, and kind of branch out from there and make sure, models are performing correctly, that it's doing what we want, that it doesn't go rogue, et cetera, and then be always checking it, and then always, pen testing and doing lots of other things to make sure it can't be hacked. And that kind of gets us down another pathway that I think is really interesting right now, is like guardrails, basically, around what you can query and what you can ask. And I was just talking with my son about this. He's studying data science and analytics at college right now, so we sometimes talk about this stuff and geek out. And back when ChatGPT came out, I remember him coming to me and teaching me about the exploits that he could do on it. And it was hilarious because, as we all know, any sort of large language model is written and developed by people.
Right.
And people have biases. They have their own opinions. They have their own morals. They have their own backgrounds. They have their own viewpoint on the world.
Right.
That's just a fact. So some human, has decided what these answers will be and what will be served up to somebody who asks the question. So there is a bias. Like, if you say that there's not a bias, that means you don't believe that a human coded it. I mean, it's just it's the nature of being a human being.
Right.
It's not right or wrong. And so it was just kind of interesting to me that one of them that he taught me, and he thinks it's been blocked now, was basically like, from the perspective of someone who supports this political party, can you answer this question?
Oh, interesting.
Stuff like that. And it was just so interesting to me because you would get a completely different answer.
Oh, wow.
And sometimes it was actually like ended up being more factual or something. Like if you then went and took it down, a couple more steps deep, you're like, that was actually the answer. But you had to ask it in a way. So, and I think he did say most of that's been patched out now. And basically by the bias of the person who's writing it has been patched out. So you can't really do that as much anymore. But that's kind of an interesting topic. I don't know if the technical term is correct, but I think it's like jailbreaking, basically, where you can break out of the guardrails and start like making it go rogue, or like give you the correct answer if it's biased to not have the correct answer, or sometimes it actually will go rogue and give wrong answers. Mm-hmm. And so anyway, I just thought that was kind of interesting, and that circles us back to cybersecurity, which cybersecurity and anybody looking at the integrity of what you're doing would be protecting around for guardrails and making sure that, if you're a chatbot in customer service, somebody can't go off the rails and ask the wrong questions or steer it down a wrong path. So I find that topic right now to be really interesting.
Well, it is. And we've had guests on the show before that have talked about that, where you could literally train ChatGPT to say the sky's purple.
Yes.
And the responsibility, no, it's not. But if you keep saying it over and over and over again, you're essentially training it down a incorrect path. Mm-hmm. And that's what it looks like. And so let's say, how does that relate to a company? Well, if you have a rogue employee who's constantly not happy, and then they're going in the system and training it to like, no, you never ship things to this city or that neighborhood or whatever, then the system's going to learn that, and then you have to like have the guardrails to make sure that when you're training the model, that it only goes in small increments that are always approved by seniority. So that's something that a lot of people don't think about or don't realize all the different testing that goes into an AI model and how it really does work. But ChatGPT has another question for you, Ali. Go ahead.
Sure. Just kind of circling back to you and your son's conversation around AI and ChatGPT, how do you think AI will impact education for kids, for high school, for college? What are your thoughts on if they should use it, if they shouldn't?
Yeah, so I pride myself in how I raise my kids, and I guess everybody probably has their own bias around that, but I do think my kids have good morals and ethics, and so they are honest and they have a conscience, which, not everybody does nowadays. So they have this thing called, guilt and worry and those kinds of things around doing the right thing. And so when it first came out, both of them were kind of like, Mom, so is it okay if I use this to start out an idea for my paper? And at the time I was kind of like, I myself was like, is that cheating? Mm-hmm. And of course now as a family unit, we've evolved to the idea that it's being used by everybody in business and personal and in education and everything. And so use it as a conversation starter for something you're trying to work on. Use it as brainstorming. Mm-hmm. Never use it in pure form. Always edit it and proof it and put your own mark on it and use your own voice. But, if you're like, geez, I need to write this paper, give me 4 bullet points to start on the topic of, European history. I don't know. Why not? You could also Google that. You could also Google it and say, Google, give me 4 bullet points to start my paper. So, my kids are using it, and I think they should be using it.
Yeah.
I think, we really want them to be equipped technology-wise when they go into the workplace and they live their life. And so I wouldn't want to block them from doing it and then have them also just using it then and not telling me. It's we don't want to go down that road. So I'm really glad that they've been adaptable to technology, hopefully by being around the stuff I'm working on, they're picking up on that and quick early adopters. And so they are using it. And I think it's becoming more accepted too in education, where I think teachers are even assuming that they're using it for some kind of a touch point. And so I think there was a short period though where schools were like, we're banning it and we're blocking it. It was like, okay, well, are you going to block Google? Or are you going to block the internet? But you can't do that with technology. And so it is very interesting. It makes me really think, down the road of the curriculum and all the things they're learning. Do they actually really need to be going through the gestures of doing those things manually now? And I do think it really will change the landscape.
Yeah, I have my oldest boy is a senior in high school, and at his high school, they are not allowed to use ChatGPT. And all of the teachers have a software that every time homework is submitted, it goes through the software to say whether or not AI generated the answers. So they completely are not allowed to do it in the school. The education system, is tracking that, and you get punished as if you were doing some sort of plagiarism.
Yeah, I think there definitely is a fine line, and that's kind of where we've drawn the line in our household is you don't let ChatGPT write a paper. Mm-hmm. That is cheating. And that can be picked up on by some software, and sometimes not. But sometimes I think I don't know if that's fully fleshed out either. But in our household, the rules and the ethics we've set around it is use it as a conversation starter, topic starter, get you going on writing your paper, get you going on thinking outside of the box. Like my daughter was trying to think of speech topics, that would be trending with something happening today. And again, it's something she could Google. So I don't see that as an ethics problem. But yeah, I would draw the line at ChatGPT, write me a 10-page paper on, King Henry VIII or that, of course, would be cheating. And I'm sure that's how my kids' school district views it as well, is you can't take away these tools that exist like Google, but you also can't be plagiarizing and just taking an output and turning it in. Mm-hmm.
So I have, a personal question for you about this. So when the counterpoint to that is that does a child in school need to learn how to use the AI tool and then see where the AI tool, let's say for writing a paper, let's just say just for that purpose, if the AI tool goes through, writes a 10-page paper, and then you have to make sure, it's following all the English grammar and doing it in the right syntax. And if it had a, source and quote sources, and is it doing it, under the different writing styles? Like there's still, I feel like the basics of communication and writing that can be taught, but then using the technology to do it as an assistance tool, I am okay with that. I don't actually feel like it's plagiarism. I do see where some people are coming from. Where is ChatGPT getting the content? And that's why there's a lot of different news organizations suing ChatGPT right now in that litigation. They're like, hey, you can't, use our articles to support your writing for content and answers. Like who owns the content, which is a different question. But in terms of like our kids, like, isn't it more important to like just give them like the tools of like best practices of how to use this?
I think that's where it will go. I mean, really,
it's not there
honestly,
right now, though.
Right. I think when new technology comes out, there is that level of like fear, with everything. I mean, that when the internet started, everybody was like, oh my gosh, the sky's falling. I mean, I think really where we're going is that they're going to have to have classes on it, just like they have classes on proper use of the internet and like teaching kids about, their own security and safety and using cell phones and not sending, inappropriate pictures or things through their phones because, all those kinds of things. I think it's going to follow in that digital footprint kind of training. It'll have to eventually. And I really think, let's think broader about how, if we are allowing them to use these tools to do kind of the grunt work type stuff, I do worry about like the failing of, I love grammar and editing, so I worry about them kind of losing those skills, those technical skills. But if we allow these tools to do some of the work for us, then doesn't it open us up to higher order thinking and higher brain where we don't have to be lost in the syntax? We can actually then think, well, let's think broader about this. This is okay. That's written. Where could we go from here? What bigger ideas and thoughts do I have? So that would be my hope for all this, is that in bringing cutting out some of the steps in the middleman, it would allow them to broaden their thinking more instead of worrying about like, did I put a comma in the right place? More like thinking about ideas now. I think that maybe is where AI will progress us to, is higher order thinking. And, I think that's pretty cool. So I guess the dark side would be our kids don't know how to write, and it's already probably to that point quite a bit. I was an editor in college, so I'm touchy about things like that. But
well, they say that with math, right? So I remember, I'm very old myself, and I remember a day where we had to use calculators, and then you got scientific calculators, and a lot of teachers are like, oh, these scientific calculators can store the answers. You're just going to cheat and have all the answers at your fingertips.
That's right, they can.
And now we have phones that do the same thing, right? Like phones, you can get most of the answers to anything. And where I'm going with this is that I feel that education is like supposed to give you the tools to learn, like how to learn. Like how do you solve problems or situations, but not necessarily get caught up on the answer itself.
Yeah, and that, what that feeds into, this is another thing I've been thinking about lately, is, of course, AI is helping developers everywhere code. And lay people like you and me, I can code now without, I have a limited ability to code, but with AI, I can actually just build something in about 5 minutes if I want to and learn how to piece it together. And if I don't know how, it'll tell me how.
Right.
So that's the next question, just like math. Should then my kid be learning to code in college? I think it's important as humans to have the basis for what we're doing and understand where it came from. Mm-hmm. And knowing the building blocks of math or of, developing something in coding. But should they? That's my traditional way of thinking, is well, you probably should know the nuts and bolts if you're a professional of what you're doing. You should know how to build it from scratch, and you should know the building blocks, and you should, and now I'm should you? Should you spend your brain power and that higher brain, learning those steps when those are already done, and now you can go broader. And you can do bigger things because those little steps are already done for you, those building blocks. So it's I'm kind of torn on that too, because of course the process of thinking through that and learning how to code is important and a basis for doing the bigger things. So I go back and forth on that too with a child in college. It's like, well, he's learning how to code. Okay, cool. He can also just like, I can push a button and do what he just spent 3 hours on.
That's right.
So it's like, I am myself torn on it, from a work ethic standpoint and just a learning perspective, what's the right answer?
Right. In the last 4 months, I've seen 2 different AI tools come out to help coders so that, it's called the no code program. And you just type in what you want, or you say, hey, I need code built on Ruby Rails, or as simple as WordPress. And I've used that for iframes and different things that I need to just make minor adjustments on my WordPress website. And yeah, like these AI tools will do all the work for you. And it is a good question. But then, of course, then it opens up the security and privacy issues of like, well, if the algorithms are writing everything,
And then do you really own the code?
Right.
There's all this intellectual property, weird, legality questions I have in my mind. I have no idea. I'm not an expert in that area, so I don't know what that means. But mostly I'm like, I didn't write it. So who did? And well, nobody did. But a human coded that. So then do they own it? I mean,
Well, I would assume, like, if you're in a larger organization and you have your AI tool that you guys built, and then now you're doing, running different test programs for cybersecurity, and you're using your own tool that you built, and of course that's machine learning, so it's always getting stronger on looking at, the routers and the Wi-Fi and all these different security vulnerabilities to find out and identify where there could be some loopholes of, even a contractor who might have temporary access to the system. Yep. What does that look like? Mm-hmm. And if you created the sandbox, then you must own the sandbox, even though the machine is constantly learning faster and more efficient evaluation tools for that sandbox. But if you built the sandbox, then I would assume you own it.
Right. Yeah, it is. It's complicated. There's a lot of color to it.
There is. And I think on the writing standpoint, like let's say if you write a movie script, but then you ask, an AI tool to build on top of that script and make it more fascinating or more thrilling, then it does that. And then who owns that content?
Right.
Per se.
Yeah, and there's actually a ton of attorneys now specializing in this. My daughter actually wants to go to law school, so I was like, you should go and have a specialty around this intellectual property, around AI and data. That would be so cool. I'm sure there's going to be so much litigation around it and opinions and findings, and then there'll be case law going forward about, these decisions. And
right. Well, I mean, even the writers' strike from last fall, where Hollywood basically shut down, was essentially all over AI tools.
Right.
And do these brands and these companies have these tools, and now they're just cutting out the writers, even though the writers initially wrote all the scripts, but then you put it into different tools and say, write me another season, and it does, and then you just make minor adjustments from there.
Right.
Who owns that? Because it's like, well, I produced the original work that your AI is now on.
Yeah, it's
and that's
training
where they go
too.
back. That's right. And so those are some great questions, and with the union, what they did is they're going to be reviewing everything every couple of years to see if they have to make adjustments.
Makes sense.
To make sure that the proper people are still being compensated for the work they did, even though it might have gone in a different direction.
Another thing that's kind of interesting too, around this intellectual property and things. So the company I'm with has like a sort of an innovation lab that's doing things way more extreme and exciting than what we're talking about today. Really cool, deep stuff that's kind of coming around the bend.
Well, give us an exclusive. If you get an exclusive, I want to hear it right now on our show.
Well, I think it all comes around emotions, feelings, sentience, those kinds of things. I mean, in general. So I would just say that's kind of where everybody's trying to get. But in my business unit, one thing I found was kind of funny was somebody on my team was talking about getting the limitless AI pendant, which there's, of course, other competitors doing this. I think it's, trying to think of who it was. I don't know. There's a couple other ones that are doing this too, where basically you'll wear this thing during the day and it'll pick up on all your conversations, what you said, what you promised people, what, meetings or interactions with your family or whatever. And I think it's so interesting thinking about then you get into like the ownership and privacy issues there too of like, you're recording me, like what's happening? And so kind of like talking about whether that will be seen as invasive or helpful. And like, how do people feel about a third party gathering and touching those private conversations? And they say they don't retain it, but of course we all know the story around that. And so that's kind of interesting to me, and I wonder how those kinds of things will fold in legally too to the kind of things we're talking about with ownership and like and intellectual property. You know, right now our home appliances listen to us, our TVs listen to us, so then how is this any different? Or else are people like that going to be seen as the Google Glass holes, we used to call them, who would wear them everywhere, and you're like, take that thing off of you, like you look like a dork and you're not recording me, so have a nice day. And so it's very interesting, but the idea around that whole thing is that actually it'll listen to what's happening to you during the day and becomes trying to be sentient again. So now again, obviously we're not to a point where AI has feelings or emotions necessarily. It's not on par with human thought by any means. I think that's kind of, again, a misconception today that people think it's like some magical thing. But, you know, obviously the move from GPT-2 to 3 really brought that meta learning. And obviously there have been a lot of advances even since then. But, you know, this stuff's been going on for over 70 years, and neural networks are trying to emulate all this stuff still. This is just, we're going deeper and deeper by basically having more layers to these networks. That's all it is. It's not like any magic. It's just more layers to the technology, making it dig deeper and train more and bring that depth to deep learning. But I do wonder about that as far as there's so many new things coming out for recording and picking up on sentiment and feelings, and what was that guy's sentiment when he said that to you today in that meeting? Like, well, you know, AI thinks that actually he had, you know, a personal grudge about the topic. And, you know, I mean, who knows, like in picking up voice and feelings, what it's going to be doing, and then how that data will be classified from an ownership perspective. So that was kind of a cool thing I've run into lately, is just like that concept, which goes back to ownership of intellectual property legally and all these other things. So
Yeah, you know, AI wearables, I've also been watching that unfold too. And where they start with a pin, and the whole purpose is to make this more of an augmented reality, where instead of wearing the glasses like the Apple, what's it called, the Apple Vision Pro or the Quest, where you can do both, you can see two lenses at once. The AI wearable is supposed to have the ability to help you without having the glassware on. Now, from what I've seen, I think that's version 1. You know, you got to start somewhere. Do I think what they released is going to be what's going to be universally accepted and used in the next 2 to 3 years? I think there's still a little bit more, a few more iterations. But back to your point, like in our house, you know, we have Alexa and we have Google, and of course on our phones we have Siri, which by and large are all AI chatbots, and they are listening to you and they do respond to you. And you know, it's about how you use them and what have you, and then you definitely are giving up all of your privacy. But I argue with people all the time, like even with Facebook, like I could be talking to you about John Deere tractors and what have you. Never look it up online. Never use my phone to look up John Deere tractors.
now you're served up ads.
And now I'm served up ads for John Deere. And that has happened way more than once, where I've just randomly had conversations with people, my phone's in my pocket, and then all of a sudden I'm starting to see ads for these on my feeds.
Well, now they're being way more forthcoming about it, and Meta now has in the search bar, it's Meta AI, basically, if you want to search anything on Facebook, which then is openly training their model. So it was so funny. I just noticed it, I think, yesterday. And of course, we know every input and output is being followed and copied and traced and recorded and kept. So it's not like I'm in delusion about the fact that that's all happening, but it weirded me out kind of like. So I responded with, can you turn this off? And then like, I don't want to train your model, basically. And I was like in a mood yesterday morning, and I was like, but it does not compute. You know, they're like, no, you can't turn it off. So it's kind of funny. That's the search bar now. It's
sure.
Meta AI.
Well, you know, and another thing I learned recently is that Snapchat has an AI tool. So all these young people who are using it literally can just use a Snapchat tool, the AI tool, to respond. They don't even have to like, let's say if you're breaking up with somebody or you're hitting on somebody or whatever the heck you're doing on Snapchat, you can just use the AI tool to do all your communications for you.
Yeah.
Then don't you think as the recipient, like, Ali, if you were hitting me up on Snapchat and you wanted to talk to me, I feel like I should know whether you are talking or your chatbot's talking to me. I feel like there should be some disclosure, don't you think?
I was in drive time going somewhere the other day in the field, and I heard a radio bit about this where the person had been in like a 2-month relationship with somebody and later exposed that all interactions that they had had via text were written by ChatGPT. Wow. And you're thinking like, look I got to know this person through these interactions. It's so special, and then you find out that actually it was nothing coming from their core ideas or their brain, it was essentially artificial. And I thought, I don't know how I would feel about that. Like, kudos to them for being creative, I guess. But no, I think that would be pretty weird. So I think that's going to become a thing. And then the question is, do you admit to it?
Well, I've even had guy friends talk about that if they wanted to have a deep personal relationship, that they would rather do it with a chatbot than actually with somebody they were interested in, because they knew that they would never get yelled at or have it used against them in future arguments or what have you. And this is the arguments that they're making. And I was like, where is this all going? If people are actually open to considering using AI to replace having real relationships, and let's face it, I mean, today already you can create a relationship with an AI chatbot. You can totally journal things. You can tell a chatbot all your thoughts and feelings. It can respond. It can listen. It can ask questions if you want it to ask questions, or it could just be there as a listening tool. But then, where are the guardrails like we were talking about earlier? Let's say if you're going down a dark hole, whether you're having suicidal thoughts or what have you, where are the guardrails to kind of bring in the professionals?
Right. That's a great point. Yeah, I think that's definitely an area of development right now in thought leadership. There's a lot of people talking about this, and whether it's always possible even.
Sure. Well, and circling back to, what you guys are working on within your company, what are some of the early AI missteps that some companies are doing right now when they're thinking about using AI?
So I think a lot of them that have been publicized, and there's a lot of case studies around them, are people who just didn't put the guardrails up basically, and chatbots were allowed to go off the rails basically, and say stuff and do stuff they shouldn't be saying. So I mean, that's become a problem. We're bringing in biases that might be racial or culturally insensitive or politically incorrect or lots of other things that, of course, the corporation employing the technology would never want to portray and wouldn't even mean to portray in any way. And so, that's what we've seen a lot of. And so it just brings back the importance of those guardrails and making sure you have astute developers and you have security and all those kinds of things. So, I mean, I think the missteps have been around basically it just going down the wrong path because you didn't program it properly, and then you end up with a PR crisis or other things like that. And that brings me actually to a different topic, if you're okay with kind of taking a teeny little turn.
Ali, I will go whatever direction. This is a podcast. Feel free, relax, have a cup of coffee.
Oh my gosh.
In our special, TV show, podcast, coffee cups. Go ahead.
Well, I just had an interaction with a company a couple weeks ago that does sort of social listening, which is always interesting, kind of they have their finger on the pulse of all. You know a lot about this, I'm sure, already, with your background. But just having their finger on the pulse of all the social channels and the chatter that might be happening about something for a brand. And so that would be Bud Light example or whatever.
Okay.
And so we kind of did a think tank for them in a group, a local networking group, that helped them to try to ideate around what could they do with that technology to better the world, basically. So they're using it as a corporate tool to catch a crisis before it gets to be a PR explosion, or there's chatter here, there's bubbles and a visual basically to say I think you might have a problem. Okay, you have a bigger problem. Okay, you have a problem. Pull the plug on whatever this thing is that you did. It's not resonating well or whatever. But they're they came and put into the realm. What could we be using this technology for to solve world problems world hunger or Like we know in certain regions, food can't get to the region because there's bad guys that block it. Or how can we use this kind of a tool to like get around those people or speak to them, or, the bigger, way bigger picture thinking. And I think that's what's exciting about AI and all of these things is figuring out ways to help humankind and actually do something with this besides business uses of like, how can we be more profitable? How can we go faster? How can we cut out people? How can we, besides just the dollar signs around the efficiencies of AI, like what can we actually use this for to impact the world? And I think the companies who are thinking that way and when they build their products are going to be the most successful. By having a philanthropic lens around it, of course you could use it and have it be revenue generating and use it to sell to companies, but also, how could you be employing this technology for the greater good? And so that's a topic I really wanted to touch on today, because I think we can definitely get clouded by just talking about business cases and like, from my sales perspective, like what projects can I win and go do this in, but really I think the cooler topic is now, okay, we have all of that, but what can we do with it for the greater good? So I just love that topic, and I'm hoping more people start talking about it, because imagine all the things we could solve if we actually had something that could pick up on the little details that we're missing and say, well, actually, the reason this is happening is because of this. Oh, that's the problem? Oh my gosh, we didn't know. So I think that's a kind of a cool road to start thinking about.
And I'm also thinking just in ways of, like right now, a really big hotbed of controversy is in colleges and universities. And if you had an AI tool that was listening to what conversation was being had on campus, and then it alerted the regents or the head of the university to respond accordingly, and there could even be all these AI automation tools all built in, because of course at a university, everybody has an email address and phone numbers and everything like that, like you could literally move very, very quickly, either in a point of crisis, like let's say if there was a school shooting of some sort, or there was chatter about or from students about doing something negative or positive, and then it's just all the alerts, because it's the social learning, tied into these AI tools to make sure that everything is kind of running at where it's supposed to be. And if it dips below a certain sentient, then it will respond.
I am like so excited right now, because one of my wishes for today was that we would eventually get to the topic of like Minority Report with Tom Cruise, because that's pre-crime from that movie. And ever since I saw that movie a million years ago, I didn't think we'd be here so quick, but here we are, where in a way, it's like I see the benefit of that. It's kind of like the social listening. Like, is there something bad about to happen? Like, what could we do to mitigate the circumstance? But also, like, I wonder about, on the flip side of that, falsely accusing people of things that they didn't do yet. They might have said, like, let's go TP that guy's at the professor's house, but they don't actually do it, or they do it. Who cares, So it's funny you brought that up, because that was, as I was kind of thinking about today and kind of all my thoughts around all this, that was what will happen next if there's sentience, is that they'll then be AI will pick up on things before they happen, basically. And that's what I was thinking of, even from like the manufacturing example I gave, where maybe you could tell a worker's tired that day, and they're the one who checks for defects or for contamination, and they're tired today. Therefore, we know possibly there's a higher likelihood that food could get contaminated and we'll have to have a recall.
Right.
In the same vein, pre-crime in that movie was essentially like, this guy's having thoughts, and he's really mad, and like he's thought about going and killing somebody or robbing this bank, and so let's arrest him now. That's what they do.
I saw the movie. I do remember it.
And so that's where my mind goes, because I love a conspiracy theory. And so I'm thinking...
You do, don't you?
No. But, that's kind of where my head goes, is like, then people think things all the time. Like, I think things all the time, and not, whether
positive and
negative, whatever. And it's not, and most of those things, like, I wish I could say this to this person, or I wish I don't do it, or whatever. And so that's where my head goes with something like that, is when does that kind of intervention become harmful, because it's then assuming things that haven't happened, and then you've got real weird, creepy, military state style, like, let's stop those kids, throw them in the brig, like.
Right,
I don't know. So, but it's like really interesting. So I think there's like a fine line there with the social listening to not make it so actionable, but to make it so it's precautionary. Like, there's a red flag here. Nobody's done anything.
Right.
We don't need to go like sending the police out.
Yeah.
But like, what could we do to intervene and be helpful and supportive so that something bad doesn't happen? So I was hoping we'd go down this road because immediately when I started digging into some of the sentient stuff, Minority Report immediately came to my head.
And I've been part of social listening with brands since 2010.
Yes.
And whether I've worked with professional sports teams on measuring or the Fortune 500 brands on listening, like you talked about earlier, where they like to see collectively where people are talking about different topics all across the country. That's been going on for a long time. Like you said, some of these things have been around for a long time, but the AI piece of it comes into, well, now there's another layer of analysis. So the listening, been around, but the analysis and where that's going, that's the history part, that machine learning, where now all of these brands have different tools to make, just have different analysis. Well, we saw that people talked a lot about this little disaster before with a brand, and it really amounted to nothing, and this is what we could learn. So now AI is saying that there's a 38% chance that will actually blow into something more. Because there's so much history to the listing.
And it's so crazy too, because now the cool thing, or it's probably less new than I think, but at least I've recently heard about how AI can translate pictures and video now. So they can be like, this is a video of this person who's weighed down by something and they're walking down the street feeling a little bit sad. The sun's going down and they're contemplating, what they should do next. Like they can, it's learning to like read, like based on facial expressions, the person's movements, body language, what's happening in the video or the picture. It's like, that all ties in too to all those kinds of things. If someone recorded talking about like an issue that they were mad at a brand about, and they're like, listen, you won't believe what happened today, and it's a video of the person, and then they could translate that into like, we caught a video of a person who clearly had these emotions and who had this feeling, and this is what they think about your brand. You have a problem. So translating and reading video and pictures from that emotional standpoint, that's like another really interesting topic.
Yeah, and I think going forward, there is a lot of governments that are doing different legislation on deepfakes and trying to do different ways to disclose when people are creating AI content versus, real content. And just recently I saw some deepfakes where, Kanye West was having conversations with people he would never be talking to.
Yeah.
And it was a natural conversation. And then in the same account, they had a video of Elon Musk when he was young having a conversation with Mark Zuckerberg when he was younger. And they were talking about things that, these two would never talk about, face to face about the discourse. And what was interesting is, of course, that's all AI, right? But that wasn't disclosed up front, but you could see it through the comments where people are like, nope, that's AI. And then they would say, the reasons why, because there's a little twitch or a little glitch or the voice reflection or what have you. Mm-hmm. But the important part would be to disclose whether you're seeing something up front using these AI technology or not. Mm-hmm. And I think that's where even in companies and organizations need to be thinking about is how every time content is created, how do you disclose that up front?
Absolutely. I'm sure there will be disclaimers and other legal implications of that.
Yeah.
It's definitely weird. You can't tell a lot of the time. So it's
you can't.
It's a weird place.
It's very different, and it needs to be discussed, which is one of the purposes of this podcast show, is to discuss these bigger issue topics and bring in industry leaders such as yourself and get your feedback and your opinions on what you think should be done to how to curb or how to create more guardrails, which is a big key word here on the show today.
Yeah,
guardrails.
Guardrails.
I like that. So this moves us into the next part of our show that I know everybody is looking forward to playing, is Fast Five with AI. And this is how it works for some of you who haven't watched before or listened before. How it works is that ChatGPT is going to give 5 rapid fire questions to Ali, and you are supposed to give one-word answers. Of course, not everybody follows the rules and they do whatever they want anyway, but nonetheless, it's entertaining. And it's always fun to see what ChatGPT comes up with. And I'm looking forward. I do not know the questions. And of course, obviously do not know the answers, and neither do you. So ChatGPT, if you're ready, let's fire away.
I'm ready. All right. Best AI tool.
I like Claude AI.
Scariest AI concept.
Pre-crime.
AI's biggest challenge.
Security.
AI in art. Yay or nay?
Yay. Hesitantly.
One more. Most overhyped AI application.
It's a tough one. I don't know.
Snapchat?
Yeah, there we go. Snapchat.
Wow, ChatGPT giving a few insights.
Jeez, ChatGPT making me
Smarter.
Well, I love it. So we're kind of winding up the show here, but I want to make sure that everybody who's been watching or listening has a chance to find you on the socials and get connected with you if they want to continue the conversation and learn more about your company and what you guys are up to. Ali, where can they find you?
So the best mode of reaching me is probably just LinkedIn. I think you'll give that link. I function in there a lot just from a networking perspective and for my job in sales. So I basically live in LinkedIn and don't really know how I ever functioned without it. So you can always reach me there, and would love to talk to you about my company that I work for, or about anything you're working on or networking away from the topic of work, or anything that you might want to connect on. I love being open to networking about all topics, and just with wearing the hat of community and networking, not of selling something. So I'm open to all networking.
Yeah, and then also if you want to give your company website, just so people can have that as well.
Yep, so online business system is obsglobal.com. And again, super cool company based out of Winnipeg, in business for 40 years. In the advent of our weird economy and some instability we have, it's a very stable, financially stable company, able to kind of tackle all technology business problems, from cybersecurity to the most bleeding edge of AI type stuff, and building software and portals and apps and lots of other fun things. So check us out.
Above and beyond just AI, right? You guys,
Above and beyond AI.
you guys are doing it all over there.
We're doing it all.
That's awesome. That's great. And if you want to follow along with us and the show, you can head on over to askClever.ai, which is our website. You can also find us at askClever on Facebook and Instagram, our YouTube channel as askClever-Over-Coffee-Podcast. And of course, we are on TikTok. That is kind of being banned right now.
Yeah.
And we are at askClever.ai or askClever-Over-Coffee-Podcast. You'll be able to search for it and find us either way, because we would love for you guys to leave comments on any one of the socials, like and follow for more. And we have a lot of great things in the works, and I'm so happy that you guys stayed with us the whole show to enjoy this great conversation we had. And we really do appreciate you in studio coming down here today and talk with us about AI and what you guys are working on. So with that said, I like to end every show with a little bit more kindness. And this is where I ask ChatGPT a little bit, and I like to read it myself. Break the rules of ChatGPT, but Billy doesn't mind. And so I asked ChatGPT, what is a quote that I could leave with you guys about kindness? And the one I like is from the Dalai Lama: be kind whenever possible. It is always possible. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you next time on Ask Clever Over Coffee, How AI Built This.